He'll buy the flowers. He'll listen intently. Remember every detail she shares. Show up on time. Compliment her endlessly. Make her laugh. Support her dreams. Yet she drifts away like smoke through his fingers. Why? Why does a man, who seems to be doing everything right, still lose her heart? This is the secret paradox every man wrestling with love must face. Women don't fall in love exclusively because of kindness or effort. They fall under the spell of a deeper, often invisible current, a signal wired into their biology and echoed through eons of evolution. And when that current fades, no amount of good intentions can reclaim it. Most men approach relationships like a checklist, believing love is a transaction. Behave correctly, respond suitably, and she will remain faithful and enamored. But love is neither a contract nor a prize to be won. It's a living, breathing dance choreographed by the most primal parts of the human brain, the limbic system. The emotional epicenter where dopamine ignites desire and oxytocin cements trust. These chemicals don't care about politeness or rational schedules. They respond to something far more enigmatic: authentic social signals of dominance, security, unpredictability. The secret language of attraction hidden beneath social norms. Women's attraction isn't a simple reward for good behavior. It's a biological fact that female brains are wired to seek partners who ignite these specific signals, indicators of genetic fitness and resource stability. Yes, but also emotional and behavioral nuances that demonstrate raw vitality and subtle dominance. The hormones coursing through her body, estrogen, oxytocin, and even cortisol, create an emotional landscape where love forms not out of convenience but out of an instinctual recognition of value and danger. This biological advantage safeguards the species, pushing women to fall hard and fast for men who exhibit a mysterious blend of strength and vulnerability, presence and unpredictability. Yet here lies the trap. Modern social conditioning tells men to suppress the very traits that send these signals: dominance, assertiveness, strategic mystery, replacing them with politeness, predictability, and an eagerness to please. Men work tirelessly to be good guys, thinking the safe and steady road preserves love forever. Instead, they slowly extinguish the primal chemistry that sparked it in the first place. The paradox is haunting. The more they try to do it right, the more they lose the thrilling, magnetic spark. Women don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with potential, a potential for danger, for emotional risk, for excitement that few men dare to tap into. This is why so many encounters look identical on the surface but differ wildly beneath. The same dinners, the same conversations, the same kind laughter mask an invisible war raging at the neurological level. What she experiences isn't a simple measure of good intentions. It's a complex calculus of ancient biology, subtle behavior, and unspoken signals. And when those signals stop pulsing, when he becomes just safe, predictable, and nice, something inside her brain quietly disengages. Dopamine levels wane, cortisol rises, and she begins to fall out of love, often without fully understanding why. The heart, it turns out, is not the soft sanctuary men imagine but a battleground of psychological and evolutionary forces. To master attraction means stepping beyond being merely good to becoming the kind of man capable of maintaining this secret current, the underlying tension formed by dominance and gentleness, security and danger, presence and mystery. It means understanding that love's fierce flames require more than simple consistency. They demand emotional mastery, strategic unpredictability, and the fearless willingness to evoke vulnerability and strength in tandem. But these are not lessons taught openly. They live in the shadows where biology whispers its commands. Knowing this, it becomes clear why so many men find themselves lost in frustration, driven to question their worth, tormented by the confusion of love's vanishing spark. They see the disdainful withdrawal and ask, "What did I do wrong?" The answer doesn't lie in a list of missed steps or whispered promises but in a failure to deliver the primal message women are wired to crave: the biological secret locked in subtle gestures, body language, tone, and emotional cadence. Without these signals, the illusion of love fades into the cold amber light of routine and obligation. This is the cruel irony. Love's most potent fuel is also its most elusive. The very qualities that kindle it can be invisible to the untrained eye yet unmistakably clear to the subconscious mind. And when those qualities diminish, abandonment follows not out of malice, but as a natural course of biological logic, a survival mechanism. Ancient and merciless, the fear of loss becomes a shadow lurking just beneath the surface. A silent dread that accompanies every moment the magnetic pull weakens, signaling to her brain's archaic circuits that the man she once desired no longer represents the undeniable advantage she needs. So what can a man do when the rules everyone plays by fail him? How can he decipher these secret biological codes and reclaim not just her attention, but her devotion that feels eternal and electrifying? The answer is not found in grand gestures or endless compromise. It is hidden deeper, in the neurochemical dance of attraction and retention, in the delicate balance between his confidence and his capacity for emotional depth, in the ability to evoke feelings she didn't even know she craved. It is an advantage that, once understood, can transform the hopeless chase into a masterful game where desire burns fiercely and endlessly. But when that flame threatens to flicker, when the signals begin to fade, the danger is not merely emotional, it becomes existential. The silence in her gaze, the withdrawal of warmth, that terrifying sense of distance. These are biological alarms sounding deep inside the brain. These signals portend endings that no amount of reasoning can delay. And it is here, in this dark and silent moment, that every man's greatest challenge reveals itself. How to fight the slow erosion of love before it collapses into an irreversible. The moment a woman's heart begins to close, it is not with words that she signals retreat, her body language, her subtle withdrawal, the slight retreat of her gaze. These are the primal alarms that go unnoticed by untrained minds but screamed in the silent language of survival. Beneath the polished surface of civilized interaction, a war rages, a war fought not with swords, but with the invisible weapons of chemical signals and psychological vibrations. Her brain, eternally attuned to a cocktail of hormones, is reading every nuance, every hesitation, every flicker of unpredictability or certainty in the man before her. This unseen battlefield is the true arena of love and loss, where biology erases sentimentality and exposes raw truth. Consider for a moment the paradox at play. Human beings are creatures of habit, craving safety and predictability. Yet it is precisely unpredictability, the spark of the unknown, that kindles passion. This is no contradiction, but a deeply encoded evolutionary impulse. Dopamine, that exquisite neurotransmitter of reward and anticipation, thrives on uncertainty. It makes desire pulsate with intensity when the future feels volatile, when unpredictability is balanced with the promise of security. A man who is too predictable becomes a drilled map, transparent and unexciting, his presence stripped of the compelling paradox that keeps her senses alert and her heart racing. In contrast, when a man embodies controlled mystery, when his emotions and actions shift like the tide, he becomes a living riddle, catalyzing dopamine surges and awakening a longing far beyond conscious comprehension. But unpredictability alone is a fragile beacon. If left untethered, it breeds anxiety, a corrosive whisper of danger that her brain cannot ignore. Here is where dominance and security collide. True dominance is less about aggression and more about the silent reassurance that a man can navigate chaos without losing control, that he is a master of himself and his environment. This quiet command sends an unmistakable biological fact straight to her limbic system. This man is the anchor in the storm. It is dominance not as tyranny but as unshakable presence, paired with the capacity for gentleness that signals emotional richness rather than cold aloofness. This duality is the magnet that draws her deeper, the tension that awakens her implicit trust and intoxicating desire. Her evolving hormones compound this intricate dance. Estrogen sharpens her sensitivity to social and emotional cues. Oxytocin floods her bloodstream in moments of closeness, reinforcing bonds that promise safety. Yet when cortisol, the hormone of stress and alertness, rises in response to emotional unpredictability unbalanced by security, the equation snaps. The same biological system that once drove intoxicating desire flips into defensive self-preservation. What she sensed as thrilling becomes threatening. The neurochemical symphony shifts from attraction to avoidance, and no amount of rational explanation or polite behavior can reverse the tide. Her inner calculus, honed by millions of years, makes it clear. This is a man who cannot be trusted to keep the delicate balance intact. Now, imagine the emotional consequences rippling outward. He shows up on time, listens, supports, and yet, she grows distant not because he lacks love, but because he unknowingly stopped signaling the exact qualities her ancient brain demands. The very traits he suppresses, assertiveness, unpredictability, emotional risk, are what biologically trigger her emotional cascades. She doesn't consciously articulate these cravings because they are whispered below awareness. But make no mistake, they dictate her experience of love. When those signals dim, her emotional world restructures itself. She becomes closed, less engaged. Her dopamine circuits starve for stimulation, and the surviving erosion of oxytocin leaves only the residue of routine and obligation. This silent decay often masquerades as mere loss of interest, but beneath it lies a profound biological verdict. This is the emotional paradox at the heart of male-female attraction. Kindness and consistency, while necessary, are insufficient on their own to stir the deepest wells of desire. They form the foundation, yes, but the architecture of lasting love demands something far more complex, an interplay of dominance and vulnerability, safety and excitement, certainty and enigma. The archetypal romantic hero for women is not the flawlessly reliable caretaker, but the man who embodies the tension of potential for protection, potential for challenge, potential for raw emotional depth. He is the man who leans into risk without crumbling, who can both command and yield, who maintains the electrifying current beneath the surface of everyday affection. This dynamic explains another unsettling truth often ignored. The more society urges men to sterilize their masculinity and mold themselves into the ideal, nice guy, the more they extinguish the very signals women's brains crave. The modern prescription for emotional safety comes at a biological cost. When men quarantine their shadows, their impulses, and their primal edges, they erode those invisible signals of vitality and presence. Attraction does not flourish in sanitized predictability. It thrives on the rhythms of tension and release, the subtle dance between emotional risk and secure return. It is a dance few men learn, and fewer still master without losing themselves to confusion or fear. In the theater of love, this battle is waged beneath conscious understanding, yet it determines who rises and who falls. The intersection of biology and behavior reveals a ruthless calculus. Desire is not owed, nor is it a product of moral effort. It is a dynamic, fluid state, an unspoken pact between neurochemistry and behavior where the failure to maintain the right balance signals a biological expiration date. And for every man who laments that love slips beyond his grasp despite his best efforts, this truth must be faced. To reclaim that elusive current requires mastering the paradox of attraction, not through surface charm but through the subtle orchestration of primal signals. It demands a fearless acceptance of the raw, unvarnished sides of self that society urges men to hide. Love, therefore, reveals itself as both fragile and ferocious, a biological advantage bestowed only on those willing to dance on the edge of certainty without falling into chaos. The retreat begins when the fire in her eyes dims, when the subtle tension that once hummed between you dissolves into nothingness, leaving a cold, hollow space where warmth should lie. It is not a grievance she utters aloud. It is not a plea for attention. It is a silence far more profound, a withdrawal of the primal signals that once assured her subconscious. The ancient wiring that whispered you were the one who could hold her fragile equilibrium amidst chaos.
Cheers.
Herein lies the cruel revelation. This silence is not absence but a signal, a coded message from her biology that the necessary electric charge between you has been severed. The very chemistry that kindled her desire recoils, not from a lack of kindness or effort, but from a dwindling certainty that you are the man evolution programmed her to choose. To understand this deeper is to gaze into the raw underbelly of human attraction, where desire is not gentleness, but the pulsating edge between safety and risk, clarity and mystery. Women's instincts do not simply seek comfort. They crave the subtle tension that promises fertility, survival, and legacy. This tension is born from signals imperceptible to the conscious mind but lightning quick in the limbic system, the brain's ancient command center. It is encoded in the cadence of your voice, in the deliberate rhythm of your movements, in the measured defiance that breaks routine and lights a firestorm beneath polite conversation. These are not mere behaviors but evolved signals, gestures that broadcast a potent message of dominance wrapped in vulnerability, a promise that beneath the veneer of control lies a man who dares to confront chaos without crumbling.
The contrast
Dopamine,
really makes
that
the
rush of
white
elated
stand
desire,
out.
is the chemical herald of
Very
new
clean.
possibilities.
I like the
It thrives on
minimalist
novelty,
approach.
on the subtle unpredictability woven through a man's presence. When he becomes transparent, overly familiar, too safe, dopamine recedes, replaced by the creeping rise of cortisol, stress hormones that whisper of boredom, of threat, of loss. Oxytocin, the hormone of trust and bonding, too cannot flourish in dry soil. It requires the fertile ground of emotional risk, the tension between dominance and surrender, to weave its web of intimate connection. When these rhythms falter, when he trades his edge for endless acquiescence, the biology that once elevated her interest turns quiet, detached, an instinctive self-preservation unfolding as distance. This biological dance is not a formula to be followed mechanically but a current to learn how to navigate, an emotional paradox where strength is not domination, but mastery over oneself enough to wield dominance with tenderness, where predictability is balanced by strategic mystery, and where vulnerability is not surrender but a compelling signal of authenticity. Women's emotional landscapes are shaped not only by the presence of safety but by the thrilling awareness that the man beside her can both shield and unsettle her, that he embodies both the sanctuary to rest in and the storm to awaken passion. The evolutionary advantage lies not in banishing risks from the relationship but in presenting them in measured waves, enough to keep desire sharp, enough to stir unconscious hunger for connection that buffers against extinction, both emotional and genetic. In practical terms, this means the good guy who insists on predictability and politeness unwittingly extinguishes the very flames he hopes to nurture. His efforts to press love into an endless cycle of predictable reassurance provoke the biological instinct to withdraw, not because she doubts his intentions but because her mind, hardwired to preserve the species, interprets predictability as a sign of diminished vitality. It is not a judgment of character but a primal algorithm deciding the worthiness of investment. The emotional consequence is tragic. Men grow confused, baffled as the woman they cherish slips away, while she silently recedes into a void birthed by evolutionary impulse, not conscious rejection. The solid, nice guy becomes the quiet architect of his own loss, a man whose very goodness becomes a signal of its absence. The darkest irony is that this truth, so potent it feels like forbidden knowledge, remains unspoken. Taboo. To wield it means accepting that love is a battlefield of silent biological warfare, where signals, not words, determine victory. It demands courage. The courage to embrace the shadows within, to unsettle the safe harbor of comfort for the deeper, more volatile currents of human connection. To master attraction is to become a sentry stationed at the crossroads of fear and desire. Understanding that the moment love begins to fade is a biological alarm calling for the revival of that secret language, dominance paired with vulnerability, unpredictability wrapped in presence, that once drew her soul into yours. What emerges is a stark philosophical truth. Love's greatest allure is rooted not in conquest but in the constant reinvention of oneself as a living signal of life and possibility. It is a relentless challenge to speak the language encoded in hormones and instincts, to resist the blandishments of society's comfortable scripts, and to embrace the exquisite danger of emotional risk. In this space, love is no longer a passive state but a dynamic, unfolding performance, a dialogue written in the silent grammar of biology and psychology, where every gesture, every glance, every breath holds the power to ignite or extinguish desire. And so, the question lingers in the charged silence: can a man surrender his certainty, step boldly into the unknown shadows of his own nature, and rediscover the primal current that commands devotion and drives passion? Or will he continue to dwell in the safety of scripts and good intentions, unknowingly allowing the most vital signal of all, the vibrant pulse of instinctual attraction, to fade into the background noise, leaving love to wither quietly, unseen and unexplained? The silence between them grows heavier with each passing moment, a stillness not born of peace, but of something far more unsettling. It is the quiet before the inevitable collapse, the breath caught at the precipice where feelings once roared like wildfire now smolder faintly beneath the ash. Imagine that space inside her, the part of the brain where attraction once flared fiercely, now dimming as the signal fades, the frequency no longer received. This is where desire begins to unravel, not with drama or accusation, but in the slow, almost imperceptible retreat of that ancient spark, the primal message that no man can fake or manufacture with mere words or gestures. It is here, in this hollowed-out terrain between intimacy and withdrawal, that the truth about attraction reveals its most unsettling shape. It is an instinct beyond reason, a force governed not by choice but by chemistry and code. Women do not simply love with their hearts or minds. They love through a complex orchestra of signals, subtle and unyielding, that emanate from the very core of their neurological design. When these signals cease, what remains is a void imperceptible to the casual observer. No drama, no grand exit, just a quiet emotional erosion that leaves a man wondering what invisible fault dragged her away. What is overlooked is that this intangible language is less about the good a man does and more about the invisible dance of signals he transmits without ever knowing it. A smile, a tone of voice, a glance steeped in quiet dominance, an unpredictable shift in mood followed by tender connection. These are the small combustions that set desire aflame. To her subconscious, they are the markers of survival, of vitality, of that wild, untamed promise that life can still surprise, ignite, and possess. But when he settles unthinkingly into predictability, these signals diminish, withdrawing like twilight before night's surrender. Dopamine, that messenger of pleasure and anticipation, ebbs, signaling danger to her brain's ancient circuits. What follows is a release of cortisol, stress, alertness, a biological red flag declaring the loss of something essential. This is no slight against goodness or stability. It's an unbroken evolutionary script ensuring that love is never a simple transaction but a continuous, unpredictable gamble with life itself. This hidden desire cannot be summoned by etiquette, nor bolstered by the comforts of compliance. It thrives in the fertile soil of emotional risk, the willingness to be seen in the raw interplay of strength and fragility, confidence and vulnerability. Women are not attracted merely to safety. They are wired to seek the thrilling ambiguity between the known and the unknown, the secure and the dangerous. The man who can signal, with subtle but unmistakable cues, that he holds both power and unpredictability in balance is the one who awakens the relentless biological impulse toward love. This is why men who bend too far toward kindness alone often find themselves ghosted by the very affection they tried to nurture. Their signals flatten, wide and white as winter's snow, leaving no shadow, no depth, no enigma to compel the ancestral attraction buried beneath modern sensibilities. In love's neurological economy, the predictable man becomes invisible, His presence is comforting, yes, but also a biological non-event. A signal so faint it fails to provoke the ancient dance of chemical seduction. It is not enough then to be kind or consistent. One must master the art of channeling the dual forces that stir passion, dominance and surrender, invitation and withdrawal. The most magnetic men understand this at a cellular level long before it reaches conscious thought. They mirror the wild rhythms of nature herself, inconstancy, surprise, the power to command and the grace to yield. They know how to evoke within her the biological paradox that makes love both exquisite and cruel. The need for safety wrapped in danger. The craving for connection laced with mystery. These men become not just partners but signals, living, breathing codes that tap deeply into female evolutionary programming. Through body language that teeters between control and softness. Through layers of unpredictable emotional expression. They maintain the circuit where dopamine flows freely, oxytocin weaves its binding threads, and cortisol remains subdued in the warmth of secure uncertainty. The relationships they build are not fragile because they rely on perfection, rather, they thrive on the dynamic tension of imperfect but potent presence. This dance, though, is a precarious one. It demands emotional sovereignty, a mastery over one's own impulses and fears. A fearless willingness to be both protector and challenger, nurturer and enigma. It is this emotional command that keeps the biological fires burning, prevents the slinking shadow of disengagement from swallowing the flame. When a man shies away from this complexity, retreating into the comfortable terrain of well-meaning niceness, he unwittingly signals the demise of desire. He becomes a silent casualty of an evolutionary script still writing itself beneath the surface of every relationship. Without this tension, without the strategic unpredictability that sends subtle alarms and confirmations to her brain, love withers quietly, a ghost leaving the room without farewells. The profound irony is that the very traits society often cautions men to suppress are the ones that ignite the clandestine symphony of attraction. Strength is not mere aggression but controlled power. Vulnerability is not weakness but an invitation to shared risk. Presence is not perfection but the audacity to be imperfect in captivating ways. To walk this line is to inhabit the shadows where primal psychology and modern emotion intertwine. A place where the rules are unwritten and often unspoken. It is a realm few dare enter, yet one every man must understand if he wishes to transform love from a fleeting spark into an unyielding blaze. In this space between certainty and chaos, love reveals itself less as a sanctuary and more as a crucible, testing not only the man's capacity to sustain desire but his courage to confront the darkest truths of his own nature. Here lies the ultimate test. To wield the power of attraction without succumbing to the safety of stagnation. To be both the storm and the harbor, the danger and the home, the signal that awakens instinct even in the quietest moments. Because love, in its most raw and exquisite form, is neither tame nor predictable. She senses it before she can name it, the invisible pull. The subtle current beneath the surface of conversation and smiling eyes. It is not what he says, but how he moves through the world, how he carries the tension between power and tenderness without apology, without false bravado. It is the quiet confidence that flows from a man who knows his own worth. Not from arrogance but from an unshakable internal steadiness that reverberates at the deepest level of her nervous system. This signal, this primal broadcast, flickers on wavelengths too ancient for words. It whispers promises of protection, of thrill, of the unpredictable magnetic surge that will disrupt her calm and ignite her senses. Consider for a moment the dance of neurochemicals in her brain. How dopamine surges like a wild pulse, craving novelty and challenge, craving the rush that comes from a man who is not a mere fixture in her life but a force of nature who can shift landscapes. Oxytocin will weave its delicate webs of trust, but only once the dopamine flame has been stoked. And therein lies the intoxicating paradox. The male who is safe, steady, endlessly reliable may build a fortress of oxytocin-fueled attachment, but if he fails to spark the dopamine storm of desire, If he presents himself only as sanctuary and never as the enigmatic tempest, then the attachment can become an anchor dragging her heart to stillness and eventual drift. Evolution carved this blueprint with relentless precision. The female brain, finely tuned over millennia, reads not just the words but the undercurrents, voice modulations hinting at strength restrained, eye contact that does not concede, gestures balanced on the edge of deliberate unpredictability. These are signals of genetic fitness. Yes, but more so signals that he embodies the capacity to navigate chaos yet remain unbroken. A paradoxical blend of chaos and order. Danger and sanctuary. To her subconscious, this is not merely attraction. This is survival encoded into the marrow of her desires. A biological imperative demanding a partner who can weather storms and command tides, not just soothe them. And yet, in the modern world, one awash with social conditioning and the relentless ache to be good, nice, predictable, men unwittingly silence these primordial messages. They replace them with script-following behaviors, the polite text, the carefully planned date, the well-meaning but scripted compliments. The problem is not kindness itself but its purity alone. When kindness loses the edge of controlled wildness, the fierce contrast that carves desire, it becomes a lullaby to the brain, signaling safety so absolute it borders on boredom. Her dopamine systems, ever vigilant for the spark, begin to dim. Her cortisol may rise instead, not from fear, but from subconscious frustration, an emotional paradox where love becomes a quiet ache, a dull shadow pressing on her chest. The signal has weakened, the magnetic pulse dulls. This biological fact manifests daily in relationships where men pour heart and soul into being sufficient, only to find their woman slipping through their grasp like water escaping a clenched fist. The emotional consequence is profound and, tragically, self-reinforcing. As desire wanes, so too does the man's confidence, which is itself a crucial transmitter in her neural symphony. Doubt creeps in where certainty once stood. Attempts to recapture spontaneity become calculated and expected, eroding the very unpredictability that once drew her like moth to flame. The feedback loop tightens, ensnaring both in a labyrinth of frustration, confusion, and silent withdrawal. But the force sustaining love, what sets it apart from mere companionship, is this tension between mystery and revelation, dominance and surrender. It is a delicate equilibrium maintained not through grand declarations but through the artistry of self-possession. The man who masters this terrain understands that vulnerability is not submission but an expression of strength. The courage to show cracks in the armor while holding the helm steady. This is the secret advantage that transcends charm, a mastery of emotional paradox that signals, I am here, I am real, I am worth the risk. For women, this declaration resonates deep within her fight or flight systems, an ancient signal that says the danger is real, but so is the reward. Imagine, then, the power held by a man who can modulate this tension, to be predictable enough to quell existential fears yet unpredictable enough to tantalize the dopamine circuits with fresh, potent signals. He becomes an enigma wrapped in the familiar, a storm contained within tranquility. She is drawn not because he meets the checklist but because he embodies the emotional intrigue wired into her biological code. This is the dark poetry of attraction, a language spoken not by words but by every gesture, every breath, every micro-expression that declares his dominion over himself and, subtly, over her heart. And yet, this power is not given, it is claimed. It demands a man reckon with the shadows inside himself, the impulses society bids him suppress, the wildness beneath the calm exterior. It asks of him the bravery to disrupt comfort zones, to embrace uncertainty as an ally rather than an enemy. This is where the greatest lesson lies. Love is not a destination marked by ease or permanence but a continuous voyage across forbidden waters, charted by instincts and steered by intentional, often unseen, choices. Each moment becomes a test of whether he can reignite the signal or resign to silence. The mystery deepens when one realizes that this dance of attraction is less about the woman's whims and more about the man's willingness to command presence in the face of biological truth, to harness the raw forces within and transform them into something both terrifying and tender. The call to mastery, then, is a call to embrace paradox, to become simultaneously protector and challenger, to wield vulnerability like a blade sharpened by confidence. Only in this charged space does love transcend routine and emerge as the incandescent force it was always meant to be. So where does this leave the man who has followed every conventional rule yet feels the magnetic current slip beyond reach? He stands at the crossroads of biology and psychology, facing an ancient dilemma. To surrender to the comfortable illusion of love as transaction, or to awaken the dormant signals buried beneath social conditioning and reclaim the primal code written into his very being. For desire is not a promise kept through duty but a secret language that demands fluency in the dialect of dominance, mystery, and emotional audacity. To unravel this language is to grasp not just love's fleeting spark but the elemental flame that seasons the very essence of human connection. And within that flame burns a whisper, dark and irresistible. True attraction does not seek to be understood, only to be felt, deep, wild, and unrelenting, because at its core, love commands surrender not to perfection, but to the raw, untamed potential that lies within every man willing to become the signal she cannot resist.